Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Policy and Resources Committee, which is being conducted from the Chamber and remotely through Microsoft Teams. Translation facilities are available for this meeting, so please ensure that you have your headsets if required. And if you're coming in online, just a wee reminder to put your phone on mute so we're not hearing any background noise coming through. Thanks. In regards, please ensure your microphones are off. And before we begin, I will ask Councillor Duncan McInnes to lead us in prayer. The meeting is now being recorded.
Opportunity to be here in this council chamber and online. And Lord, we pray that you would give us the wisdom and the guidance to make sure that we as a Cónle move forward collectively for the benefits and of all the community. And Lord, we pray for the leader who's chairing this committee, the convener as he goes about all his various duties, and Malcolm, our Chief Executive, as he leads and guides us along the way, a way that can be very difficult to navigate in such challenging times. And Lord, we pray that all around us at political level fully understand that we are navigating a way that as a Cónle possibly hasn't seen in the last 40 years, as we're seeing energy costs, inflation rising to unprecedented levels. And Lord, we pray for the many within our community that are going to be forced into a situation where they may find themselves making the decision on whether they're going to eat or heat their homes. And we as a Cónle hopefully will be able to make sure that those that are suffering the most will be guided and given all the assistance that they require. Lord, at this time, we pray for Joe, who has given so much of his life to the good work of this council and to the community. And as we heard this morning, the many projects he has been involved with that have been of such assistance to the whole Western Isles. We pray that for him and his family, that you guide and help him in his new post, and that we will see that in the new post he'll be guiding the council along as well. Lord, we pray for the royal family at this particular time as they come to terms with the loss of their mother, a queen that professed her faith, her Christian faith, over a generation and led this country with honesty, integrity. And we pray, Lord, that the King Charles will follow a similar example. And Lord, we see that here we have no continuing city, and we are at various stages in our own lives, and we know that you are there to guide us and direct us on that journey. Your word clearly says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one cometh to the Father except through me. And Lord, we pray for all those things in your name. Pardon our sins for Christ's sake. Amen.
Thank you, Councillor McInnes. Just a reminder for members online to put their microphones off. In regard to the conduct of the meeting, a reminder of the following. If you're a member of the committee attending remotely, please leave your camera on and your microphone off. Officers attending remotely, please leave both off unless you're called to speak to a report or answer a question. A reminder to members and officers in the chamber of the queuing system. The chair controls the mic. First in the queue flashes green and the remainder are solid green. The chair will allow each speaker in. Only 2 mics on the floor will be read at any one time. If you wish to come back on a question, please leave your microphone on, and officers speaking to the reports, I would advise you to do the same. Committee members will be given priority. In regards to declarations of interest, members must leave the chamber or end the call remotely. Finally, a reminder that the meeting is being recorded and will be made available on the Cornish website following the meeting. Item 12 will be taken in private at the end of the meeting, and I'm ruling items 8, 9, 10 and 11 as urgent to allow the matters to be considered prior to the next meeting. So item 1, the minute of meeting of 22nd June 2022, and is for approval. Approved. Item 2 is declaration of interests. You're invited to declare an interest in any agenda item at this point. If you become aware of an interest during the meeting, then I would ask that you declare it at that time. When declaring an interest, it would be helpful if members could indicate briefly the nature of that interest, and this helps to make our decision making more open and transparent for the public. Are there any declarations from members? No. Okay. Item 3 is the minute of the meeting of Human Resources Subcommittee of A, the 23rd of June 2022 and B, September 2022. They're for noting. Item 4 is the minutes of the meeting of Community Safety Board of September 2022. Sorry, that item has been withdrawn. Apologies. Yeah, it's been withdrawn and be submitted directly to the Corlia. So apologies for that. Item 5 is the minute of the meeting of the Social Work and Social Care Board of 21st September 2022, and that is for approval as well. Okay, approved. And item 6, performance monitoring. The following reports provide an overview of the business plans and related performance issues at the end of the second quarter of 2021-22. Malcolm Byrne, Norman MacDonald and Ian McKinnon will highlight key points and answer questions on their respective remits. So first up is yourself, Malcolm.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be as brief as I can because the report is quite a full one, and I know some of the energy matters were considered at Sustainable Development Committee this morning. Just in terms of the summary, in terms of the department, we have 36 actions within the business plan. 34 of these are on track and 2 are amber, they're not red, so no concerns there. I don't think details are in the report. Our budgets are on track, which is a big thing to say when you read the revenue monitoring report. That's quite a big thing to say at this moment. So I say it with some happiness, but noting that the budget is tighter than usual at this stage in the financial year. Just again, for the benefit of new members and newly elected and returned members, if you want to see the business plan progress reports, these are all available online. There's a link in the reports, as is there to Interplan. So moving on to the report itself, just a couple of highlights. 5.5, we approved a corporate strategy for the 2022 to 2027 period, in the full knowledge that it is, of course, for this newly elected council to review its corporate strategy, and you will have an opportunity to do that through a seminar, first of all, and through committee later this year. On the business plan actions, 6.2, as I've said, the 2 which are amber are set out there. One on risk management, there's a report on risk, of course, on the agenda today, and the internal audit, operational audit plan. We're just a little behind target there. The annual plan has not been approved, but that is, of course, a priority for our newly appointed Chief Internal Auditor, who is with us today at the meeting. Moving on quickly to the key policy areas, that's section 11. Once again, I ask you to note we're coming to the end, sadly, in my opinion, of European Social Fund programmes. We've requested an extension to both the programmes, that's employability and poverty and social inclusion. Vitally important work, in my view. That's now been extended to 30th of June 2023, but that is likely to be the last extension. A lot of to follows here. Levelling Up Fund bid, as you know, is in. Still waiting to hear back from that, as we are on Shared Prosperity Fund. Just bring 11.4 to your attention, just because it's interesting. I think we had a joint bid with the other island authorities to secure the funding that's mentioned there, and that's to support those under and unemployed to upskill and reskill within the construction industry, gaps in the market locally, as I think we all know. Now, that's an example of the ways in which we now seek or have to seek funding. It's a positive thing when we do that jointly, but that's the kind of inventive way we have to seek funding now. And I think that it's good that that particular bid has met with some success. I think community-led local development, that's child of leader, was discussed at Sustainable Development Committee this morning, and its links to community learning and development were explained, so I'll not cover these, but the information's there. Likewise, on energy and climate change, we have a report on climate change, of course, at the end of today's agenda, and the energy matters, I think, were likewise covered this morning. Growth deal, section 12, there'll be a members' seminar on 19th October. If I remember rightly, we are nearing, inching towards full deal sign-off, which is very good indeed. These projects have moved through the system with remarkable speed, with the assistance of the joint committee of members, the programme board of officers, and of course Anne Murray and colleagues managing the whole programme, and we hope to have sign off in January. National Care Service, I think those of you who were at Social Work and Social Care Board have heard enough on National Care Service. I spoke extensively about that this morning, and the full response is you have already. I should say also, we submitted a detailed response on ferries. I think that was circulated to you in my last members' update before I went on leave. If it's not, I'll recirculate it. That was a very detailed response. My thanks again to Councillor Ustian Robertson for his assistance in its preparation. And I suspect, given current announcements or recent announcements on ferries, and the means of designing and procuring ferries, we're likely to be asked to give evidence to the relevant committee of the Parliament in due course, and that invitation would be gratefully accepted. So I'll leave it there. Chair, happy to take questions.
Thank you, Chief Exec. Any questions or comments from members? No. Okay, thank you for that. We'll move on to strategic finance, and that's Norman.
Thank you, Chair. Excuse me, a fairly standard report from us. Our business plan really revolves around annual tasks like budgets and annual accounts and the related returns. So there's no real development projects to report on. At this stage, everything's progressing as expected. At the end of last financial year, there were a few audit action points that were still outstanding. I'm happy to report that we're now making some progress on these. I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you for that, Norman. Any questions from members? No. Okay, thanks for that. Next up is investment delivery, and Ian. Thanks, Ian.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everybody. I think what you'll have in front of you is the standard form of the performance management reporting from investment delivery for the first quarter. Details on the financial performance is included in section 8 of the report. But as far as the 4 major projects that we're involved in are concerned, there are updates against each of those in the appendix to the report, and I'll maybe spend a wee bit of time going through each of them. In terms of the Goat Hill development, we still have continuing good performance in terms of safety management, but undoubtedly the biggest challenge facing the project is the ongoing delays to the completion of the project. And since the report was written, we've had a further reassessment of construction completion from the contractor, and this is now likely to be the end of November. Majority of the delay, so probably some of you are aware, is due to continuing challenges faced by the contractor in the procurement of subcontractors, the capacity of the local supply chain to assist where they can, and the willingness of mainland-based subcontractors to come to the islands. And the main contributing factor for that being a relatively buoyant construction market in the Central Belt. The revised completion date means that the transition of services from the existing care homes at Dunberris into Nation will likely take place in February next year, and colleagues in health and social care are gearing up for that very important milestone. I've included some photographs in the appendix to the report, and from these and alongside those of you who have had the opportunity to visit the development in the last few weeks, I'm sure you'll agree that notwithstanding the delays we're facing with the completion date, it remains a very impressive and important development for the Comorla, and will facilitate a significant increase in the quality of facilities available for the users and providers of health and social care services in Lewis. As far as the Ballinbattersea campus project goes, there's a detailed progress later on in the agenda, so I'll come back to that in due course. Third major project is the Lochmaddy Pier project, and as you'll recall, construction activity on that project started on the sites at both Lochmaddy and Belfast in the spring of this year. Progress is good, with works continuing ongoing at Lochmaddy, and there's some progress photographs included in the appendix, and the construction and the transfer of the reinforced concrete caisson from Belfast, the dry dock in Belfast, to its temporary location at Lochmaddy is now complete. The forecasted expenditure remains within the total budget of £22 million, and completion remains on schedule for the end of March next year. Last of the four main projects is the extension to the Benadrove landfill facilities, and the construction and the commissioning of that project is now complete, with the facility now operational since last month. There's still a minor commercial matter to be resolved with our engineering team, but the project's been delivered pretty much within the £4.4 million project budget. The reports for noting, but if the committee have any questions on any of those projects, we're happy to answer them. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that report. Any questions from members? No. Okay, thank you very much. Three very good reports. Thank you. Do members agree to note the reports? Agreed. Okay. Next up is item 7, and this report in Finance and Policy seeks approval of the risk management policy and strategy, which has been revised, and it can be found at Appendix 1 to the report. The main revisions to the strategy are outlined in paragraph 2.1 of the report, and the priorities over the next strategy period are detailed in section 5 of Appendix 1 to the report and are detailed in paragraph 2.3 of the report. The report is from the Chief Executive. I believe it's Rebecca that's presenting. Rebecca.
Thank you, Chair. So as stated, this report seeks approval of the revised risk management policy and strategy. And as the report states, the disciplines of risk management and performance management are closely linked, as both are concerned with the successful achievement of objectives. And we've merged the two working groups to provide some necessary links with these two disciplines. And we're going to continue looking at various ways to merge processes. At the moment, the next on our list is integrating the reporting. Progress has been made within business continuity management, and business continuity plans formed part of the budget working papers in February this year. That was the first time that's happened. We continue to work towards a complete set of BCM documents for the council. And finally, the strategic risk register is currently being looked at by corporate management team, and this will be reported to the next committee series. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. Any questions from members? Yes, see no lights. Okay, thank you very much. There's recommendations for approval at paragraph 3.1 of the report. Agreed. Okay, thank you. Item 8 is the report provides an update on the progress of the 2018 to 2023 capital expenditure programme as of 30th June 22. Spending in the first quarter amounted to 6.2 million, with the main expenditure being in relation to major building projects, including Lochmaddy Pier Works, Lewis Residential Care, and the new cell at Benadrove landfill site, as well as disbursement of regeneration grants and the Island Infrastructure Fund. The appendix to the report shows the detail at the project level on progress of the delivery of the programme, and Norman MacDonald will answer members' questions. Norman.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. I don't really have much to add to the detail of the report. Mr. McKinnon gave a quick update on the main projects. In terms of the forward capital programme, officers have started considering a list of projects for possible inclusion within the tight constraints that we're going to be under. That will form the basis of the capital seminar over the next couple of months, which will allow members to have input into the process. There's a recommendation in the report also about the purchase of skips. There's funding in the replacement vehicle replacement programme for funding that. So it's for approval. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Norman. Any questions from members? Don't see any lights. So do members agree to the recommendation at 3.1? Sorry, apologies. Councillor McLean online.
Hi there, sorry. Given that if it is approved to get the new skips, do you know how long it would take for them to be shipped out and all the rest of it and in place?
Thank you for your question. I'm getting a shake of the head. I don't think we have a time scale. Hold on. I'll bring Norman in.
I think you would have to ask the head of municipal services for that information.
Yes.
Okay.
I think this was discussed, yes, but we can arrange for an answer to be given. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, thanks again. No other questions? Okay, do we agree the recommendations at 3.1? Agreed, thank you. First quarter revenue monitoring, and it's Norman again. So this report provides details of the coroner's forecast revenue outturn for 2022-23. A summary of the financial performance to the end of June 2022 is appended to the report. The report details the cost pressures on the coroner, which include increasing costs of fuel and the impact of the pay settlement. And further detail is contained in the concurrent report on the budget update. Norman?
Thank you, Chair. As been mentioned before, obviously this year is going to be dominated by the inflation on electricity, oil, etc., and the pay award. But if setting that aside for a minute, at this stage in the year, as would be expected in the first quarter, there's no other areas highlighted as being of any major issue. So in terms of the budgetary and inflationary pressures, these are covered in detail in the budgetary report. So if members are agreeable, we can discuss that as part of the budget. Happy to take any specific questions on the.
Yeah, okay, thanks, Norman.
Monitoring.
Yeah, like you see in the next report, we'll go into a bit more detail, but if anyone has any questions on this report specifically, no questions, nothing online. So recommendation for approval at 3.1, approved, thank you. So the budget update, this report provides an update on the current position on the coroner's budget forecast for the 2-year period 2022 to 2024. At 31st of March 2022, there were 4 million of reserves available to help with the forward budget strategy. And it's recommended that the 2.2 million of additional costs be met from reserves in the first instance, leaving a balance of 1.8 million. This would mean an underlying deficit, budget deficit of 2.8 million being carried into 23-24, which would increase to 5.2 million after applying modest inflation allowances that are not in line with the current levels of inflation. This report details a proposed financial strategy for 2022 to 2024 at section 10. And I believe Malcolm is going to speak to this report first, and then Norman.
Yes, thank you, Chair. You've set out the headline figures very starkly there, and the key one to note there is that the underlying budget deficit increases to 5.2 million after applying modest inflation allowances. That's the bottom line, as it were. The detail of what comprises these figures is set out in the report. Simply to note the costs of the pay award, and it should be noted that the teaching unions have rejected the pay offer quite decisively. I doubt very much if there will be an increased offer from COSLA, and if a further increase is funded elsewhere, then that I suspect will reopen all the other pay claims from the SJC unions, some of whom are currently out to ballot on the current offer. So that situation has improved from when I spoke to you in June, but it's not concluded, and the figures there in 2.4 have to be taken with a bit of caution. Importantly, we have 4 million of reserves to help with the budget strategy, but we're recommending that the additional costs, which the Chief Financial Officer has set out in the previous report and this one, are met from reserves. So that reduces that helpful balance to 1.4. With the underlying budget deficit of 3.1, we get to 5.6. It's not a cheering prospect. And it's important that members note note and indeed question what makes up these figures. There's the budget pressures from pay. 6.2 sets out really the pressures which are caused by current circumstances. And of course, we have in 6.4, we mustn't forget COVID. We're proposing some good use for COVID funding in the report, which is next on the agenda. But there are still consequences. Sports facility income is not back to what it was. Will it ever be? Who knows? So there are these service uncertainties as well. Finally, in paragraph 8, we talk about the resource spending review. Now that at the moment, unless the Chief Financial Officer knows differently, is still a one-line statement, he's nodding, from government, which simply says, in essence, that local government should expect flat cash. Now, flat cash, as we know, is the same amount as you got last year, but that amount goes considerably a considerably shorter distance when there's high inflation and when there are additional pressures. So flat cash, as we all know, does not mean that you carry on regardless. So what do? We look at our reserves, we look at our spend, and we look at our political strategy, because we're a political organisation. Which brings me to paragraph 10.3. The coroner's budget shortfall is ultimately unsustainable. That is a fact. We cannot meet the annual deficits of 5.6 million for very much longer. Now that reflects we're not alone. This is the comfort. We're not alone. This affects local government. This is the position of local government across Scotland. But we all need a financial strategy. And Audit Scotland will tell us that, and they'll be right. But you can't prepare a financial strategy until you know what your grant assistance will be from Scottish Government. We now know it will be flat cash, more or less. No doubt there will be some additional adjustments along the way, and these will be very, very important. But the basis is flat cash. So it's suggested to you that there are three strands to our strategy. One is political, and it should be. That involves Scottish Government, that involves COSLA. It comprises Special Islands Needs Allowance. Can that be developed? Better use of island proofing. Support for island-led work such as eSchool. That brings us a significant income. And critically, in terms of transformational change, this is the change that will make all the difference in the Western Isles, is still a funded pilot of a single authority model of service delivery. I will bring before you later in the year my own estimates of what a single authority would free up for the people and the services and the funding for the Western Isles, because it is critical that we put pound notes against these political statements, because it would make all the difference. A phased use of reserves. We have limited options, and I'm pleased that Audit Scotland recognise that. We can't. You've heard me say it before, but I will say it again. You can't outsource the refuse collection service here, and you can't cut what it costs to send a refuse lorry around South Harris. It goes around, it spends fuel at the miles per gallon it spends. Unless we cut the service or deliver it in a different way, that's what it costs. No one else will do it cheaper. There are not the opportunities for outsourcing that are open to other councils, nor can we cut provision and expect the private sector to pick it up. If Edinburgh closes a leisure centre and there's a market, the private sector will provide one. That's not the case here. You close a leisure centre here, you deprive people within a 30-mile radius of that provision, and that is not something rightly we try not to do. So reserves, absolutely critical to what we do. If you have no reserves, you can only cut services and make people redundant. There is no other way, unless income somehow appears. Identifying further savings. We've already identified and made significant efficiency savings. And again, I'm delighted that Audit Scotland recognises the work which this council has done. And when we look at the forthcoming Best Value Assurance report, I will be illustrating that in some quite interesting ways. But there are limits. So it is our assessment, it is the assessment of Norman MacDonald and me, that there are limited options for identification of the level of savings which would turn the budget position from unsustainable to sustainable, i.e., I think that would reduce the levels of service to an unacceptable level, which you as members would approve and which we as officers would wish to deliver. So it cannot be met, in our opinion, from just cutting services. However, we do have to. There are always some efficiency savings. That's clear. I don't think there's very much, but no organisation is 100% efficient, and we will fall into that category too. So, regrettably, we have to look at statutory against discretionary, the level of service provided, which we strive to be good or very good. Do we now just have to strive to be adequate? So it pains me to say this to you, but that is those are the sort of questions which you and I and the officers will have to consider. What will be the level of service? Ultimately, do we revert to statutory services only? Again, don't be cast down to the extent that we're on our own here. I mean, these questions have been asked in every council chamber in Scotland. Understatement of the week, there are significant and unwelcome policy implications of such an approach. Obviously, we provide less for our people. But in financial terms, there is no alternative. It is essential that we look at service levels and provision as well as these other things. So, heads of service in practical terms will be coming along to the budget board to talk about the detail of that between now and Christmas. To look at options for sustainable savings for the rest of the year. 10.4 though, significant. Norman MacDonald will talk about this in more detail and I'll let him do that, but you can see that we have some reserves which we may wish to consider and deploy if that's possible. But in conclusion, our budget strategy has depended on a phased use of reserves together with service savings to achieve a balanced budget, and that's been effective. It's given you an element of political choice, which I think is absolutely essential, of course, in a democratic body. But with unplanned use of reserves through the inflation costs, through the pay award, the reserves available to support future years are diminishing. So that is an existential threat. How do we deal with it? We deal with it in a number of ways, but deal with it urgently. We must. Thank you, Chair. I know Norman, Mr. MacDonald will have something to add to that.
Yeah, thank you, Chief Executive. I'll bring Norman in first and we'll have questions after, if that's okay with members. Norman.
Thank you, Chair. I don't really have much to add to that. I think the Chief Executive covered all the main points there. Just to add that we will be carrying on to review these figures, especially in light of the electricity and oil prices. And these figures will be coming back to a budget seminar sometime between now and, I don't know if there's a date being arranged towards later on in the year anyway. And we would hope that following the budget board, some options for savings and things will come forward to the committee after that as well. But probably before that, these options will come to seminar, which will give members more opportunity to discuss informally where we go with these things. Happy to take any detailed questions.
Thank you very much for that. Gordon, I believe you first, Gordon, online. Thanks, Murray.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, thanks very much. I'm not a member of your committee, so maybe you should give members of your committee the first shout. I can wait if you.
No, so seeing as you're on already, we'll just carry on.
Okay, thanks, Chair. I noticed the Chief Executive made mention of 10.4, and there's some elements that remain unspent for a number of years. Are you able to give us some sort of figure as to how much that amounts to? And plus, I think the 4 million reserves as well. There's also 3.5 million contingencies as well. Would it be right? Thanks.
Chief Exec.
Thank you, Chair. I'll pass over to Norman MacDonald for the.
Hold on. Your microphone also.
I'll pass over to Norman MacDonald for the answer to the first point. But yes, we always keep 3.5 million of free reserves, and that's for contingencies such as icy winters and other unplanned contingencies. There is a level which Audit Scotland recommends that councils have, and Mr MacDonald will have more information on that than I. So there is that, every council carries that minimum. There is some discretion, of course, about how much you put in it, but it will be about that level. 3.5 million is about 3% of the revenue budget. So yes, in addition to the 4 million which we had, and which will now, I think, be eaten up largely by inflation and pay. We also have that 3.5, but I'll hand over to Mr MacDonald for the detail. Thank you.
Norman.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of the earmarked reserves, there's Appendix B on the Revenue Monitoring Report has a list of what makes up that balance. Some of these amounts, for example, just looking at the top of the list, Crown Estate funding, CFCR and applied, things like that. These are there legitimately because obviously we've got the money in advance, we haven't spent it yet, and we have to spend it in line with grant conditions and things like that. But there'll be other items there that have been set aside by departments legitimately at the time for specific purposes, but these things still haven't happened. So what we'll be doing is we'll be reviewing that list, discussing them with heads of service and directors, and where there isn't a commitment to spending that money at the moment, we will look at taking that into the general reserve to help with the budget. In terms of the 3.5 million, like the Chief Executive said, it is around the sort of recommended level that the Audit Scotland suggest. We can have a look at that, review the amount that we're holding. It's held there to mitigate against the risks like winter maintenance, pay rises, unexpected pay rises, things like that. And in reality, the risks are actually increasing rather than decreasing. For example, this week, the Directors of Finance Group have been doing a survey, sort of comparing what people have what councils have in their budget for pay going forward, compared to what we think we have to provide for 23-24, for example. So like us, a lot of the councils have 2% in the budget, whereas in reality, the next year's pay rise will probably be more like what we had this year. So that's actually increasing the shortfall in our budget. So while we will have a review of the 3.5 million, I think we will still need to hold a significant amount of it.
Thank you for that, Norman. Councillor Murray, were you happy with that response? We're ready to come back.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, the 3.5 million's probably survived a pandemic and Brexit, so I'm not sure what would it take for us to break that amount. But it's good to know that we've got even more money on top, 3.5 and the 4, and potential more money in unspent money. So thanks very much for that.
Thanks for that, Councillor Murray. Councillor Crichton.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for the report and the update. I think it's really important to note that had we not maintained and stuck to this budget strategy that we have done over the last more than a decade, we'd be in a worse situation today as a local authority. We really would be. So it's through hard decisions and prudence and using our reserves wisely that we are in this position, that we have managed to maintain and kept going, basically, while other local authorities have been in a much worse situation. But overall, there is an attack on local government. Let there be no doubt about that. There is an effort, a spite against local government to reduce budgets over the last 10 or so years. And that is very evident. It is not a political priority for central government to fund and to support local government. And it all culminates, all this eats away at our public services, at all that we're trying to do in our communities. And it culminates in what we have today and adds to the crisis of the cost of living we have today, when we're seeing our economy shrunk and public sector jobs reduced in a community where the public sector is the largest employer. So I'm surprised Audit Scotland aren't asking the Scottish Government why they have targeted one of the most rural and peripheral authorities in the country, that they have savaged our budget and have reduced this council's budget by the most than any other local authority in Scotland. So I think that's questions that need to be asked. But part of the solution, perhaps, and we pursued this as an authority in the last term, there were great hopes for public service reform and of a unitary authority covering the whole of the public sector, which would have gone a long way to helping us and mitigating the financial pressures that we have been under. And for some reason, that lost steam, it lost momentum, possibly because of the pandemic and so forth. But I think there really needs to be a renewed attempt to seek public service reform, especially for us as an islands authority, because although we have done very well to maintain what we have, we are now really running out of road. We really are running out of road, and it needs to be addressed urgently. And again, we said it so often, there has to be intervention at the highest levels to address this, both at Westminster and at Edinburgh. So I think we really need to pursue the idea of a public service reform, but at the same time maintaining our nerve in terms of a budget strategy and not entertain any reckless other options.
Thank you, Councillor Crichton. I agree with everything you've said there. I think we've wisely used our reserves. The worry is that we can only spend your reserve once. Once it's gone, we still have that underlying deficit. We can only go so far, and we've pretty much gone as far as we can go. There's a few bits and pieces here that we can use to cover shortfalls, but the current financial situation is not looking good. The forward budget strategy, you've seen the three proposals that we put forward. One of them is to look at governance and doing things differently. We've had informal conversations, and these things have been brought to light at regional and national levels. So it is something we're working on, and I think it's something we're going to have to push a pace really to get us to a position where we're not having to rely on using reserves to just set our base budget. We shouldn't be using reserves to set a budget. Shouldn't be the position we're in. Any other questions, Councillor McCormick?
Thank you very much, Leader. I'm not a member of your committee. First of all, I would like to say that we should keep the 3.5 million in the back pocket, and that is a policy that we've maintained over all the years I've been on the council. I don't think we should change that at all. Second thing I would say is that we've lost over 500 members of staff in the time that I've been a member of this council. That is a huge hit for our community. And I would very much like to hope that we don't lose any more staff. And I wonder if it is possible to take a principled position as a call, not to look at savings that involve staff reduction, but to look at savings that do not involve staff reduction. Is it at all possible to do that?
Yeah, let the Chief Executive come in on that one.
Thank you, Chair. Just again for information, it is our policy not to use compulsory redundancies as an instrument of budget control, i.e. we do not fill a gap simply by removing employees. These words are carefully chosen because if you or we have to remove a service and that's approved and you don't need the staff and they can't be redeployed, then obviously they are redundant in the true sense of the word. And only then are compulsory redundancies permitted within our policy framework, and we've hardly ever had to use that provision, I'm glad to say, but we do have a policy of not using compulsory redundancies as an instrument of budget control.
I do understand that, Leader. I fully understand that. I wasn't really referring to that at all. But we have nonetheless lost a great many members of staff. 500 members of staff is a bit like closing a major factory in the Central Belt. It's not something we can afford, and it's one of the reasons why we're in the difficult position that we are in. It's not something that we have deliberately done. It's something that has just happened over the years. But can we not take a conscious decision that we want to make every effort to hang on to every member of staff? It's not a question of just compulsory redundancies, but it's something. Somehow or other, these staff have been going over the years. I've lived with it and didn't like it very much. We keep losing members of staff. And the other thing that I would like to suggest is that one of the things that has kept many departments going is the ability of our staff members to access significant sums of money from out with this council. I heard recently of a sum of £700,000 being accessed by a department about a fortnight ago, I think. Now, that is the kind of chunks of money that can help us to keep going and keep our staff as part of the council. And it's also the money that allows us to create new jobs within the community, because it encourages activity within the community. So I'm trying to think of a kind of a positive approach to take to all of this, because it doesn't look very good.
Yeah, thanks, Angus. Chief Executive.
Thank you, Chair. I'll try not to comment on everyone's contribution because I know that takes time, but I agree very much with that strategy. We have pursued it where we can. I mean, eSchool is a classic example of income coming into the Corla for delivering a service which we want and which Scotland wants, and the example which Councillor McCormick references, and I know is another one. Acquiring that 900,000 with the other two islands councils is likewise an example. I referred to that in my performance report. We have to try whatever we can to raise income, but while we'll always do that and take every opportunity to do that, it is sporadic and it can't be guaranteed. So I can't put it into Mr. MacDonald and I can't feed that into the budget preparatory documents. It's excellent when it comes, and when it's confirmed it can be, but it is sporadic. But yes, absolutely, we will be looking at all and every opportunity to increase income to this council as best we can.
Thank you, Chief Executive. Yeah, I agree, Angus. I think we're in a situation where we're relying on staff to be going out and looking for funds, but we haven't got the staff in place to be doing that because we're having to reduce meet our budget by unfortunately taking advantage of staff leaving. So it's a really difficult position to be in, and then also run the projects that we've applied for the funding for. The staff might not be there to run it. So a very difficult situation for us to be in. The whole budget strategy is based on trying to keep as many staff as we can, but it's very difficult. But hope you're reassured with the comments from the Chief Executive. Any further comments or questions from members? I see Councillor Finnegan online.
Thanks, Chair. It was just to ask, following on from Councillor Crichton's comments about the single island, not partnership, the single island authority, just to ask the Chief Executive, how long, Scottish Government generally haven't been very supportive of this idea up to now, and I think how long do you think it could possibly be before they'll be forced to, with the way things are going financially in the next and in years to come? They'll actually be forced to have to more than just reject it and maybe give it some serious consideration.
Well, that's a difficult question to answer. If I were in government, I would be looking at it right now. There is a lot of public sector reform on the cards, but it is sectoral. In education, which at the moment would appear to be two public bodies replacing two public bodies. National Care Service, but these are significant reforms if they come about, but they're sectoral. They're not cross-cutting. And what we need in communities like this is the commitment to place and delivery. I won't preach though, because you all know what you'd be hearing. And I don't know in terms of timescale. I think it will become an absolute necessity, and I think government knows that. I'm starting to see on the workshops that I receive invitations to more and more on public service reform and change, and that's all good. But time is of the essence. I have said before on many occasions, and apologies to returning members, there is a gap in between what we know will happen one day and where we are, and during that time we could run out of money, and that's the point that's been made in the chamber. But if it is explicitly part of our political strategy and the other islands councils, which it is, and much of rural Scotland, then it does have a momentum, and it does have a force more than you would realise, particularly when we are having to take decisions of the kind that are contemplated in this report.
Think you're happy with that, Councillor Finnegan?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I think in 10.3 in the report it mentions, we're seeking authorisation for a funded pilot of a single authority model. So I think that might be a good way for us to bring that forward. I'll bring in Councillor McLean online and then come to Councillor MacDonald. Councillor McLean.
Hi there, Chair, Leader. It was just a couple of things. Just first of all, losing 500 staff over a couple of years is well, that's quite shocking. Are these people that have retired and left, and a decision's just been made to not replace them, or is it a case of people who have left and there's an attempt to replace them? The vacancy is still open, but due to recruitment issues, it's just not happened. Second point was, sorry, I've just scribbled notes and I can barely read my right. You know what? I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you, Councillor McLean. Chief Exec.
No, it's all been achieved voluntarily and consensually, which doesn't make it any more drastic for the economy. But yes, we have lost all these members of staff, full-time, part-time, over the last 10 to 12 years. We've done it in a very civilized way, but that money is not there available. Those salaries are not now available to the Western Isles economy, but more significantly, the services are not available to this council. They're not vacancies. These are not unfilled posts. These are posts which have been lost over the years.
Okay, thank you. That's quite concerning. Okay, thank you.
And if you remember your question, put your hand back up, Councillor McLean. Thank you.
Well, I can sort of read it there. It wasn't really a question. It was just more a comment. I think this idea of trialing a single island authority is a good idea. And to be frank, I'm not sure we have many options, so it may be the only idea. Just somewhat concerned that if this proves to if this happens and it proves to actually save money and be efficient and all the rest of it, that it's not used as an excuse by central government to cut funds further. That was all. It wasn't really a question. It was just a comment and a concern.
Thank you for that, Councillor McLean. Councillor MacDonald.
Thanks again, Chair. Yeah, Nolly MacDonald, Skiraro. Despite every single one of our decisions over spending over the last 5 years having been collaboratively arrived at, I would like to have thought we did a good job on what we were doing. I have no doubt that in the next couple of days I'm going to be hearing about how this council has been sitting on £7.5 million and how we didn't spend it and how parsimonious we are with what we're doing with our money, and it could have been done better. I have absolutely no doubt as well that had we followed a certain strategy, we would have been in a 10 times worse position than we're in today, and have had some money in reserves, which enables us a little bit of freeway to do certain things that we wouldn't be able to do otherwise. The devastation to our economy locally here through cuts over the last 20 years, 15 years, has seen, like we said, 500 jobs go. We are the biggest employer in the Western Isles, and that money should be circulating our economy, and it's not anymore. And the knock-on effect of that affects every single one of us, and every single employer in the Western Isles, every single business. I would hope that we can go forward with a degree of collaboration and consensus in what we're going to do as we progress in dealing with additional expenses, particularly to do with fuel and the fuel poverty that we're going to find ourselves and never mind our citizens, and the additional costs of a budget that will be ever diminishing. But I would like to think that we can start off again with a budget board where we have representatives from every single community and every single party represented in here, and that we do go forward in a spirit of collaboration and doing what's best for our economy, for our citizens. And we come to an agreement on how we're going to best protect them from what is inevitably going to be a tough 5 years for this Comorla. And I hope to see the budget boards sitting soon, and that we can get moving on where we need to be and strategise as best we can.
Thank you for that, Councillor MacDonald. Yeah, I agree. I think the budget board's a great place to bring these things forward and have more of an informal discussion about how we can meet these savings requirements, and also looking at the budget going forward. I think the best value audit report quite rightly highlighted the fact that we've taken the biggest hit. We've lost the biggest share of budget over the last few years, and the work that we've managed to keep doing despite that, and despite losing so many members of staff, is it's a testament to the work of the previous Corey and the officers. So yeah, just want to acknowledge that. Any further questions? Councillor McLean, is that a legacy hand? Oh no, sorry, other Councillor McLean. Councillor McLean in the room.
I have a difficulty with flashing lights today. Thanks, Chair. I'm not a member of your committee, but it's a very stark report. It's a realistic one. It's what's before us, and I fully agree with what has been mostly said here. The only thing that I do have a wee bit of misapprehension, I could say, about, or I'm a bit apprehensive about, is the reserves. I have to be honest. Can I ask before I go on, is what is the minimum, Mr. MacDonald, that we could, we've talked a lot about we must keep this 3.5 million as a reserve, and I fully understand that we need to keep some reserves. I agree with that, but why is it 3.5 million?
Norman?
That's what I'm going to ask.
Thank you, Chair.
Tough question.
Well, the 3.5 million was set maybe 2-3 years ago, and it's reviewed at the end of every budget setting based on the risks that the council face. So the budget report has a list of risks at the back, the value of them, and the minimum reserve is a sort of estimate of what we need to hold to sort of mitigate against these risks. And like the Chief Executive mentioned, Audit Scotland do mention frequently like a percentage, I can't remember the percentage, it's about 3% of your revenue budget is a reasonable level of reserves to hold.
Yes, so we held these reserves for the past X number of years and we never dipped into them.
No,
3.5.
Yeah.
I see.
3.5.
So although they were there as a contingency, but we never dipped into them. We live in we're going to live in unprecedented times from now into 2023-24. We all would agree on that. So therefore, could we then say that they have never been dipped into? And as Councillor MacDonald said, the first thing we're going to be asked when we come out of here is, why on earth are you keeping such a large figure? You've kept it for the last X number of years. Why, when we're in the situation we're in at the moment, lost X number of hundreds of employees, and yet you've kept this reserve? It's a difficult one for the ordinary. It's a difficult one for me to comprehend. Far less when we're not and we've got explanations here. What I'm saying is, could we dip into that and take that down to 2.5 million or 1.5 million in order, because we've never used any of that 3.5 million over the last X number of years. Why then in this time can we not use that for something that's coming, that's round the corner? For instance, the energy bills are going to go up in homes. There are many homes in our island. We looked at the fuel poverty in our island is higher, double than in Scotland. Why can't we not use $1 million of that to help alleviate these people who are struggling, who are freezing in their homes, and yet we've got 3.5 million as a reserve and may not touch it till another 2 years? I'm just saying that we have to discuss it. I'm just putting this forward. I'm not advocating that we should. I'm just putting it forward as a possibility, because at the end of the day, if I'm sitting in my home as a 80-year-old person and I've just got an ordinary pension coming in, I'm struggling. And why on earth then have we got a 3.5 million when we could mitigate that by taking £1 million out and helping them, say, giving them £100 or £200 a month? I'm just suggesting, I think that we should have discussion over that, and we shouldn't be so, how can I say, so hard and fast and say 3.5 million. That's my suggestion here. I'm just, and it's, I'll leave it with you.
Thank you, Councillor McLean. Norman, would you like to come back?
Thank you, Chair. Well, I did mention that we could have a look at the minimum level of balances, but in reality, the risks we're facing are going up. If you look at the figures in the report, we're looking at a 5.6 million deficit in 23-24. The 3.5 million plus the 1.4 million that we have to help with the budget isn't enough to cover that. So there is a real chance that we will need to use some of that. That we might not be able to keep the 3.5 million anyway.
Yeah. Hold on. Sorry, Susan, could you put your microphone off for a second, please? Councillor McLean has to come back.
Yeah, there is the chance. But the very fact of the reality of the situation is that there are some people in our homes and they're faced with the fact that they're freezing and they're in their homes, and that's not a chance. That's going to be a fact. So therefore, I think we have to. I'm just arguing over the fact that personally we shouldn't. I think that we shouldn't be so rigidly dealing with that. That should we dip into some of the reserves. I'm not saying we should take away all the reserves, but we're living in situations coming up that we've never met before.
Thank you, Councillor McLean. I agree with your sentiment, but the other side of it is we have a budget to set as a council, and yes, we've not spent 3.5, but as Norman pointed out, we've got a 5.6 million deficit, and we don't actually have enough if we use all of our reserves to cover that. And that doesn't take into account if we have a bad winter and our winter maintenance budget goes over, if we have mainland placement requirements, which are possibilities because we haven't got the funding to put housing adaptations in place. So the whole picture is not great. And if we do not have that, that means job losses. The next item on the agenda is looking at poverty and how we can help people do that. So I think as a council, it's a sensible way for us to do it. I don't know if dipping into reserves is the best way to do it. And the reality for the community is the reality for the council. You know, it's a situation we're in, and we have responsibility to run the council, to provide services for our community. And if we're couple of million short for being able to provide what we're doing just now, it's going to leave us in a very difficult position the following year because we won't be able to dip into that. Like I keep saying, we can only use reserves once. Councillor Thompson, I believe you want to come in.
There is an alternative to recklessly spending the reserves and spending the reserves in a way that will benefit people and benefit our budget potentially. It seems to me that one of the biggest challenges that we face is round about energy costs, which we currently have no control over. So it seems that if we could do something potentially with those reserves to look at how our energy supply that we could control that could benefit the population and address Councillor McLean's issues about people being cold in their own homes and address the budgetary issues of not having enough money. I don't have the answer, but it seems that there must be a middle ground between spend the money recklessly or spend the money not at all.
Yeah, absolutely agree. And I think that's one of the reasons we have the budget board is to have be able to have these discussions and look at different ideas and different ways we can do these things. Chief Exec.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Very, very briefly. A number of contributors have mentioned collaboration. A number of contributors have mentioned ideas. The last being Councillor Thompson. It's not collaboration is a matter of political choice for yourselves, and I don't seek to interfere in that. But as your chief advisor, as your chief policy advisor, we will need all hands to the pump, as they say, in ensuring that ensuring the Corla's financial sustainability in the years ahead. And I do urge you to contribute. I can't urge you to collaborate because that's your choice. But I urge you to contribute to the budget board, the committees, the seminars, obviously the full council meetings, and to contribute your ideas and come and talk to officers if you wish, and hopefully you will, about these ideas, because it will need a collective effort to see us through the levels of funding deficit that we will face in the next few years on the current predictions. So I do urge you to make use of these means, these meetings, and to collaborate as far as you feel able in ensuring that we have a sustainable budget for the year and years ahead. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. No other. Oh, sorry, Councillor Fraser. Sorry.
Thank you, Leader. I'm not a member of your committee. This may be a rhetorical question to yourself and the Chief Executive, but are you sensing from the mood music from the Scottish Government that they may be able to pull your rabbit out of the hat to assist us with any budgetary issues going forward?
I'll ask the Chief Executive first.
You will all have heard the Cabinet Secretary for Finance state how straitened Scottish Government's budget is at the moment, and indeed media reports suggest he is looking for a £500 million reduction in the budget in the course of this year. Now, we are not, Norman MacDonald and I are not sitting here asking you to reduce this year's budget, but that is in effect what Scottish Government is doing. So the answer to the question is no, I don't think so. But there was an intervention on local government pay. There have been other interventions. I suspect the rather alarming figures on NHS performance may also see some intervention there if that is thought to make the difference to performance. So there is always that possibility, and it's our job to keep on top of that, both as a council individually and through COSLA.
Yeah, thank you, Pat. And yeah, I'd agree. I think we had a discussion with the Deputy First Minister recently, and we've shared a lot of our concerns. And although I can't say mood music sounded positive, he was willing to listen and engage in the issues we were raising and also solutions we were suggesting, which is what we're quite good at. Usually, we're quite good at suggesting ways out of the situation. So optimistic. Councillor MacDonald.
Yeah, thanks for letting me know again, Chair. I think alluding back to what we did over the previous administration with the Budget Board in particular, I think we proved we can deliver as good as if we work hard. I mean, we've got some fantastic officers who've done a power of work and have given us great recommendations. And when we see what we did with, in particular, delivering the same kind of level of service, maybe a slightly reduced service, and the money we saved them, the bus contract in particular, which was a massive chunk of money. You know, if we can try to deliver the level of service by smarter working, I think that was the focus, I think, of the last 5 years. It'll have to be the focus of the next 5 years as well. And again, working with the officers we have on the budget board, if we can try and deliver the services just by working smarter, we just have to try and aim for that and try and deliver the services we can, because we know we're up against the wall with rising energy costs, etc. So yeah, we can find innovative ideas of saving money and delivering the service. So let's just work again and try and do the same thing.
Yeah, I agree. It's that multifaceted approach to everyone coming together. So, no other questions or comments from members, in which case recommendations for approval at paragraph 3.1 of the report. Agreed. Okay, thank you for that. Item 11 is the cost of living household support, which I previously mentioned. So this report provides an update on the funding available to support low-income households facing financial difficulties as a result of the current inflationary pressures. Appendix 8 to the report shows extracts from grant offer letters to give guidance as to how the funds could be utilised, and members are invited to consider these and any other options which would meet the desired outcomes. So Norman will speak to this report, but before we go through the report, I just want to thank members for coming to speak to me over the last couple of days about this. It's one of these areas where I think the joined up thinking and just different ideas and ways of doing things is going to be important in developing the policy that we're going to take forward. So I'll take the Chief Executive in first.
Thank you, Chair. It's just with reference to the last item. I didn't bring to your attention recommendation C, which you've approved. We're not going back, but just to approve the allocation of a proportionate amount of the pay award funding for IJB services. I should have brought that to your attention. We don't have to do that legally, but we think it's good practice, obviously, to do that. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. So yeah, so I think we'll use this section if we got we'll get update from Norman, and then if members want to put forward their suggestions on different ways we can do this, then we'll take it forward from there. So Norman.
Thank you, Chair. I don't really have much to add to what's in the report. You'll recall that this came out of the outturn report for the last financial year. We highlighted a number of COVID funding streams that hadn't been totally spent during the year. So we agreed to consolidate these amounts to sort of, that we could target the spend more meaningfully. So we've come up with £475,000, which can help to alleviate any poverty issues, electricity costs, whatever. And the appendix gives some guidance about what kind of things we can support. There's also a couple of suggestions from members that came out of the budget board. So I think the idea of the report today is to get more ideas from members, suggestions about what we can do. And then I think the proposal is that it be delegated to the Chief Executive and myself and other heads of service to come up with a package of measures that we can take forward.
Yeah, okay, thank you for that, Norman. Exactly.
Thank you. Just in case members.
Hold on a second. Norman, can you put yours off? We go.
Thank you. Just in case members are worried, you're giving carte blanche to Mr. MacDonald and me to set up a whole policy here. This is an enabling report. This is to say, here is this money. We think we need to develop uses for that money as quickly as possible. So we're treating it a bit like COVID. The principles are agreed, and then we will move to quick implementation, but that will be in consultation with you all, either through the committees or through the budget board, or probably through email saying, is this the consensus? Does this make sense following the decision today and the comments received at this meeting? So that will be an ongoing dialogue, but we don't want to wait till December, i.e. January, to implement anything following today. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chief Exec. And just following from Councillor McLean's comments earlier, you know, we're in it right now, so we need to be moving apace on this. Who's flashing? Councillor McCormick, you're flashing.
Again, Chair, I'm not a member of your committee. I very much welcome this report. There is a meeting of the budget of the Poverty Action Group at the end of this month. I wonder if this report maybe perhaps could go through the Poverty Action Group as well to get some advice on how it might best be used. People attending the Poverty Action Group are practically helping people who are in difficulties all of the time, so they might have an idea. But a lot of the suggestions you've made here are very good. Just a suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think following the discussions today, there'll probably be an updated version of it. So if we have that in time for the Poverty Action Group, if not, then absolutely take it to them and have that discussion. Councillor Crichton.
Thank you, Chairman. I welcome this report as well. It's a great example. It's a great example of what we can do with our initiative and being innovative without putting at risk our financial strategy, and being able to target and help households like Mr. McLean was highlighting earlier. Targeting them with nearly £500,000, we've been able to put a package together here, and we can really focus really sharply on those who are in need. And we can do that through those who are, at the coal face, like third sector interface, who know their communities and know the needs of their communities. And I think we should be working in collaboration with them as well. And energy costs were also mentioned earlier, and at high profile, as we know at this time. And I think that needs to be addressed to whatever intervention comes from central government. We have an opportunity to do our own thing as well, because the latest statistics in terms of fuel poverty from Energy Action Scotland are horrifying. We're talking about 57% of households will be in fuel poverty coming into this winter. So these are really stark statistics. And there really needs to be a declaration of war on fuel poverty in the Western Isles by Westminster and the Scottish Government and ourselves, because the Scottish average is about 24, so we're way above the average, and we've been suffering from fuel poverty above and beyond any other area in Scotland, and this is even before the cost of living crisis. So I think this report is really encouraging and innovative, and we can put together a package that is targeted and can have real impact.
Thank you very much, Councillor Crichton. Councillor Mustafa Hussain. Oh, sorry, could the people who are green, there we go.
Thank you very much, Chair. And I don't think many of us will disagree on what we're talking about. I think we're all agree that there are people who will need every assistance that could be given or could be provided. I think the important bit is also we need to maximize and target this small resource that we have in front of us. I think instead of just if we use it just in the just traditional ways that some of the funding have been used by been given to overall agencies, and without any criteria, without any focus, without any accountability, sometimes the money will not reach the target that we need to reach. And we all know how crucial it's going to be. So my point is, I think we need to be careful not to just provide it to agencies that may spend some of it in the usual ways I've seen that things are delivered just to tick numbers and things. So I think we need to be clear what we're trying to achieve and where we're targeting the money and how we do it. And accountability is very important for that. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Come to Francis first.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yes, I very much welcome the report and thank you for allowing us to add in our own suggestions and ideas. I think there's no doubt that this winter has the potential to be devastating in many of our communities and is probably already causing hardship, not least from anxiety. People who read the media reports or hear the news about what their costs are going to be. So I think it's going to be really important to be very strategic in our thinking here and ensure we're avoiding duplication of effort. And for that reason, I would suggest a short life working group involving elected members, the third sector, voluntary groups, charities, churches, HHP, whoever, the Poverty Action Group, as Councillor McCormick said, to coordinate a strategy for supporting the community this winter. Host events in our capacity as the authority to give practical advice both online and in person to people. For example, giving clear advice about relative costs of devices in the home. Provide accommodation for warm rooms using perhaps underused premises such as our own. We had a discussion about this yesterday. And also providing support for other organisations within our communities to do the same. I think that would mean ensuring that red tape doesn't stand in the way. And I know that rules are there for a reason, but for example, I've been aware of a situation where an organisation, charity, wanted to hold a cafe in one of our own premises, and they cannot access the premises for this reason without a member of staff being present, because you have to have a fire warden and you cannot do fire warden training unless you are employed by the council. So that would rule out a third party using a room to hold an event, whereas in the past perhaps there had been just a checklist and fire regulations to go through. And I think finally drawing together some of the threads of things we were talking about yesterday, there's a need to have a real outreach, whether a paper drop to everybody in the islands or through schools or online about what's there for them. Whether it's school meals that they're not claiming because they're worried about a stigma that no longer exists. And ensuring that they are aware of schemes in schools, for instance, for swapping clothes. We really need to make sure everyone knows what is out there for them. So as well as these targeted interventions to individuals, I think we need to be looking at what we can put together as a package. And that would start with that. I would suggest some sort of short life working group to get on to organising this strategy.
Thank you very much. Angus, could you put your microphone? Hey, Mr. Morrison.
Thank you, Leader. Again, I welcome this report. I'm not a member of your committee, but I think one of the things we've all seen as members is the financial and hardship that many of our constituents have had since COVID came in. I couldn't get over myself when I was going round door to door in May. The difference I saw in some of our people and the fact there was no social interaction there, they saw very few people over a 2.5 year period. Now, what we've done since I sit on the budget board, and when I saw this first of all coming in, I contacted my colleague, Councillor Mackenzie in the ward, and I'm just going to throw a ward initiative to you for consideration here, because we think we've got a good model here, which I think is probably working in some places already, and other areas may benefit as well. We have brought a proposal to active community groups in the 3 areas of the ward we represent in Lochs, i.e. North Lochs, Kinloch and Park. The 3 areas have a facility to take people for a hot meal, and what we suggested to them was that if there was funding available, this could be done maybe once a month. We've identified transport that can go and collect the people that are needing this facility. There's also the facility where they could come at other times of the week or the month for a coffee and a sandwich and a cake and a bit of chat with other people. Volunteers have expressed the desire to run this for us, but obviously there's cost involved in it as well, whereas if you've got facilities, you're going to have increased costs on facilities, so some of that money would be used to get that up and running for them. Where some people, and I think it was discussed, there were some people who are maybe too proud to actually admit that they need this service. As local members, both Councillor Mackenzie and I have identified quite a few people who could be in this situation, and we've put this to our community groups, and they would be willing to actually deliver. If there was a hot meal, say 1 day a week, for the other people that were coming to the facility, the meal would be delivered to so everyone actually benefited from it. It covers all ages. It also has an interaction with people. It ticks the box for the increased costs, the energy costs that people are going to have later in the year, where they don't have, this would give them some time. They would need to prepare a meal in their own home. They could go and sit together and have a fellowship evening or whatever in a facility. I think it's something that would work well. We're ready to run with this in the Lochs area if we could get funding from this to go with it. And what we were going to suggest was that it would be divvied out to a ward area, rather than, I appreciate third sector involvement in various things, but third sector is quite active in some communities and not so active in others. Whereas as ward members, we feel that we, with the community groups we're involved with, could facilitate a very good service for our vulnerable people. So it's just something to throw forward for consideration.
Yeah, thanks for that, Councillor Morrison. Councillor Hussain, oh, you've put it off. There you go.
I think that's exactly just what Councillor just said just now. I think it's important that we don't take sort of a blanket suggestion that will work. I think ward areas sometimes work differently in a way that what applies in Stornoway may not apply in Battersea. So I think it's important to use the role of the local elected members, that they're close to their community and know what works in their own community, including what Councillor Mario was saying, in your own community, using the churches and using the third sector and whoever, all stakeholders involved in the local community to so I think that's,
yeah, okay, thanks for that. Yeah, I think with as well as ward members and community groups, there's like Area 4 and stuff that exists that could fill these gaps. Susan, can you put yours off, and I'm going to bring Angus back, and then I'll come to Councillor Thompson. Oh, I've got someone else. There we go.
Thank you, Deirdre. There was one other point I was going to say as well. Obviously, someone would need to control the financial element of it going to these community groups. And I think with Councillor Mackenzie, this is the model we've just taken for ourselves here. What we have done is that we would do like a ward priority money initiative where we would look at, and so we're not actually giving it out 3 ways to 3 different organisations. The model would need to work itself and be paid for as it was going along. So if someone failed, and the other thing we were going to add there was to, given that we've got 3 facilities in 3 different locations, there would be interaction from the 3 places. So there'd be a minibus available from the North Lochs Community Association who would actually take people from one venue to another. So it's not just inclusive for one area of the ward. They would all get to meet together. But it's important that we have some kind of control over how the money would be divvied out. And I think we'd feel comfortable if we worked it as a ward priority fund that we could control that and give it to these groups as required, rather than give them a lump sum together, just in case there was a failure on one community group.
Thank you for that. Councillor Thompson, would you like to come in?
Thank you, Chair. It strikes me that there's provision in place for us to get help quickly to financial help to people who were already identified as being on low incomes, and some of that has been mentioned before about credit on the council tax, or energy crisis payments, all that kind of thing. So that's all already there. The response that this Corla made to the COVID crisis suggests to me that the mechanisms are already there. They're tried and tested, and having those in place, to use them again, so that we can also reach people before they're in crisis. No one's going to come out of this unscathed, I don't think. There's been a lot of talk within community groups about overcoming the stigma that's been mentioned a lot of times today, and people are reluctant to stick their head above the parapet and ask for help. So if we can make these events community in spirit, universal if you like, that'll take away the stigma element. There's also the issue of how people access these events. Transport's a big issue for people, given fuel costs and everything else. So it's something else that we're going to have to consider. It's all very well putting on an event, but if people can't get to it, if they're still sitting in their cold homes, we're not really helping anybody.
Yeah, absolutely. The stigma element in the room.
The stigma elephant in the room.
Councillor McInnes.
Just following on from what Councillor Morrison was saying, our MSP Alistair Allen, he circulated email to lots of organisations throughout the Western Isles, and there was an opportunity for organisations, churches. The only way I became aware of it was through churches, and there was a closing date, and there was an element of funding for 2 years available to provide the kind of things that we are talking about. So I think it would be important that we have a look at what is available from Scottish Government or from UK Government, and that we're not going to duplicate certain things that funding has been, or some voluntary organisations here have already completed applications that have gone to the Scottish Government. I don't know when the various organisations are going to be aware that they've been successful, but there was a 2-year funding mechanism available, and was very similar to what Councillor Morrison was saying, you know, to provide kind of soup, various things, and take them into a central location that would be warm. And then when you made reference yourself to visiting folk following COVID, and the number of people that are in our community, and loneliness is a key element to mental health when lots of people aren't seeing people the way they used to. And I think there's a lot of things within our community, and mental health issues are clearly something that will become more evident as we're moving away from COVID, because many of those that Councillor Morrison was saying, we're only seeing possibly one person, if one person a day. But the reason what I'm saying, Leader, is we have to take cognizance of what the Scottish Government have made and the approach they've done. I'm not sure how many organisations in the Outer Hebrides have done, but it was certainly came through the MSP's office.
Thank you very much for that. I think communication and coordination are going to be quite important in taking this forward. There are initiatives happening. There's things that we're proposing ourselves. I don't know if the Chief Executive wants to come in to do a bit of a summary, but in term, sorry, Councillor Mackenzie. Councillor Mackenzie, and then I'll come to Councillor McLean online after that.
Want to go over what everybody else has done. I mean, every single idea that's been put forward here this afternoon has been fantastic and eye-opening, and I hope it can be coordinated quickly. And I think the idea of having a short-term group getting together and getting on with it, I think that would be a great idea too.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Mackenzie. I'll bring in Councillor McLean online. Sorry, Kenneth, you've waited a while.
Let my hand up from the start. You keep going to other people. Just a couple of notes. So something we do down in Barra in the cab, me and my colleague, we used to do before COVID was once a year we would go around to Bor Varai. For anyone who doesn't know what that is, that's like a respite service for caterers, and they, you know, they have men's days and they feed them and all. It's just charity, sort of helps out. We would go around once a year and explain to them what's happening in regards to social security and benefits, you know, as carers, just give them an overview of what, you know, carers allowance or attendance allowance or universal credit or what have you. And I think it might be a good idea to maybe have somebody from the CAB or maybe someone from Social Security Scotland to cover the Scottish benefits come into the chamber and explain this to all the councillors, because while I know quite a lot about the benefit system and what can help and you can get all the rest of it. I'm aware that a lot of you folks might not, because you're, you know, other professions. So that was one suggestion. Or even extend that to calling your staff in general for just a large meeting, just so they know what's sort of happening and what help can be gotten. A suggestion I had with regards to the money, the 400 and whatever it was, 475,000. might be to put some of that money to each of the food banks. Just a couple of £100, I don't know, £400 or £500 to each food bank on each island, for buying electricity for anyone that's desperate for it, because it's all very well having a voucher, but the vouchers, it normally takes a little while to get to people. Whereas if somebody runs out of money and it's, I don't know, 7 o'clock on a Thursday or something in the evening, local food banks can be contacted there and then, and they can arrange something. Right, here's £30, pop to the co-op, get your key, put the money in, all the rest of it. It was something I was considering doing with some of my ward funding, was putting some money in the food bank down here, but I'm not entirely sure if that's appropriate for ward funding. Something else. Sorry, I've got quite a few notes. Something Mustafa pointed out was sometimes people get access to help who don't necessarily need it. A few years ago, at the start of COVID, when there was a lot of electricity vouchers being given out, we in the cab were given all the, I don't know who was issuing them, but we in the cab were given a long list of names and details to contact these people and just offer further advice, etc. And a lot of the names on the list for the local people I knew were, some of them were quite well off. But they had heard in the grapevine, oh, there's free vouchers. Whereas there were some of our clients who I know were struggling, who didn't get a look in. So there needs to be some sort of criteria in place, or use of an organisation such as CAB or Job Centre or HHP also seem to know roughly who's of their tenants who's doing well money wise and who's not. God, my writing. Oh yeah, with regards to you're talking about delivering food and that sort of thing. Something that I've personally had to do is deliver parcels in the dark of night. Sort of throw it in the car myself and go around at 9, 10 at night so people don't see me rocking up with a food parcel. I know that sounds, I don't know, it sounds mental, but people truly are. Some of them are terrified to be seen to be accepting help. If there was any funding going towards, I don't know, soup or whatever you said there, that might have to be a consideration. Sorry, just reading. And again, this was brought up yesterday. I don't know if anything can be done, but you might as well all have a think about it. The threshold where you qualify for benefits, is X. You need to have X amount of income. We'll say £500 a month. That's just a random figure pulled out there just now. Due to inflation being 10%, estimated to go up to 13, 14. That threshold means very little now. So there's just this widening gap between people who are going to be struggling but don't quite cross the line to get official state help. I don't know if there's anything we can do to support them, but it was just a comment. Yeah, put your thinking caps on, and yeah, sorry, that was a bit of a ramble. My notes sort of went on and on.
Thank you very much, Councillor McLean. That was a very interesting ramble. I think there's a few points in there that were relevant to the discussions that we can take forward. So I think Norman was taking notes there, so we can follow that up. So I think I don't see any other lights on in the room. So I think initially the short-term working group is probably the best way for us to take this forward and to do it at pace. But I'll bring the Chief Executive in just now.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you to members for that enthusiastic response to the report and for all the suggestions. Mr. MacDonald and I have noted these, and we'll filter them out as quickly as we can and come back to you with a suggestion. Thanks also to Derek Mackay, who suggested to me that perhaps this is maybe an alternative to the Short Life Group. We use the Budget Board as the supervisory body, given that can meet fairly quickly. It includes representation from all groups and all wards. So we'll think about that too. But I've noted all of the comments, all of the requests, rightly, that there be ward initiative here, that we use our area fora, that we make decisions quickly. That is the purpose of the recommendation. That's the purpose of delegation. If Mr MacDonald and I can move on that before council, with your permission, Chair, we might have a more structured proposal on the back of the minutes, as they say, which council might find acceptable if time allows to do that. So, we've noted and we'll take away all of these comments. I think everybody's working in the same direction along the lines of what's set out in the report. So we'll come back to you as quickly as we can.
Thanks for that. The only other thing I'd mentioned was the inclusion officers that we have. So
yes, just so.
Absolutely. Just. So as far as committee interests are concerned, recommendations for approval at 3.1 of the report. Agreed? Agreed. Okay. Thank you very much for your input there. Very much appreciated. Item 12 will be taken private at the end of the meeting. Item 13 is Housing with Extra Care Service Provision Summary. This report seeks approval to implement the Housing with Extra Care Service Provision Summary and Charging Policy. The proposed Housing with Extra Care Charging Policy is attached as Appendix 1 to the report. The policy outlines the various factors involved in acquiring a housing with extra care tenancy and details the care support and financial assessment process. A thorough consultation process was carried out between the 2nd of August 2022 and the 5th of September 2022, and this is outlined in the Equalities Impact Assessment at Appendix 2 to the report. Kirsty Street is available to answer members' questions, and Emma is online, so I think Emma's presenting. Emma.
Thank you, Chair. I don't want to take up time. You give a good resume of the matters in the hand, but as detailed in the report there, and as you say, Kirsty's also available to answer any questions.
Thank you, Emma. Any questions or comments from members? Councillor McLean online, your hand's still up. Is that from the previous item?
Yes, sorry, apologies.
No problem. Okay, that's fine. Okay, no questions. As far as the committee interests, recommendation for approval is a paragraph 3.1 of the report. Agreed. Item 14, discussed earlier, the Achersich Harbour. This report seeks approval for detailed design work for Achersich Harbour and pier infrastructure improvements, which are a key priority under the Islands Growth Deal Food and Drink Programme, and to proceed to tender for an application to the UK Seafood Fund Infrastructure Scheme. And Calamian, I believe, is he available to speak to the report? Sorry, Pete.
Yeah,
Apologies, Pete. Pete's online. A lovely photo of Eriski in the background. Thank you.
Indeed, indeed. It was just to add that the UK Seafood Fund Infrastructure Scheme requires a confirmed tender result as the basis for costs in the application. So that's the reason we're asking for approval to proceed to detailed design and undertake the tender stage process. The project would safeguard the life of the pier for the next 30 years and develop further berthing, which is in demand down there for both larger and smaller vessels. So it would include extending the pontoon and installing an attenuator at the outer end of the pontoons. As part of the funding package, we did have details of an application to the Regeneration Capital Grant Fund, but we've been unsuccessful with the stage 1 application for that. However, so we're looking at securing alternative funding or rescaling the project if that's not possible. We've been in touch with the Highlands and Islands Enterprise, and they're discussing the project internally. So there might be scope for some assistance there from them. But as you can see, that achieving a successful application to the UK Seafood Infrastructure Fund is central to progressing the project. So, and we need to get to a concluded tender stage by the middle of November in order to put in an application for that. Happy to answer any questions on it.
Okay, thank you very much. We had a good discussion about this earlier on. Have we got any questions or comments from members? No. Okay, in that case, recommendations at 3.1 of the report. Do we agree? Agreed. Okay, thank you very much for that, Pete.
Okay.
Item 15 is construction market volatility. This report provides an update on the impact of current construction market volatility on the development and delivery of infrastructure investment projects in the Western Isles. The impact for the Cornlia is significant due to the contribution that such investment makes to the needs of public service public sector service delivery and directly and indirectly to the local economy of the Western Isles. It is also not possible to establish any certainty in relation to trends associated with these high costs, and it is almost impossible to accurately forecast how construction costs will respond to these factors in the coming months. The Scottish Heads of Property Services Forum also receives regular update reports from Faithful and Gould, and a copy of the May 22 report presentation is included as Appendix 2 to the report. And Ian McKinnon is available to answer any questions. Ian?
Thank you very much, Chair. But the majority of the report is really for noting, and you'll see some background information included there for the committee in the appendices. But it's we should be careful not to underestimate the impacts arising from these issues, particularly with regard to those projects that are currently being developed as part of the Islands Growth Deal, those projects that are being taken forward through funding from the Levelling Up Fund programmes, and to the development of our own capital programme for the next 5 years as well. And not only will the higher costs have to be accommodated through either additional funding or where that's not available through a reassessment of the scope or the scale of the proposed investment. But as you point out, the current level of market volatility is making it very difficult to accurately plan for investment and with any degree of accuracy and cost certainty going forward. And that's the reason for our recommendation that these issues be included on the Cornwallis Strategic Risk Register, as mentioned by Rebecca earlier on, and a risk mitigation plan be developed as well. Although I haven't set out in the report that the key elements of that plan could involve, first of all, project delivery teams, those that are involved in the Islands Growth Deal and etc., to review the sufficiency of their cost plans to ensure market conditions have been taken account of in their planning and development. The development of our own capital programme will also have to take cognizance of current costs and that lack of cost certainty that we mentioned. And we also need to look at various construction procurement routes to ensure best value and deliverability. And that ranges from even the smaller projects all the way through to the larger scale projects where we've been using national procurement frameworks. It would be useful, I think, very beneficial for us to engage with the local supply chain, provide them with transparency in collaboration with other contracting authorities such as HHP, the Health Board and others, regarding the potential workload over the next 5 to 10 years, and try as much as possible to facilitate capacity building for that sector locally. And last but not least, we also need to really engage with Scottish Government regarding the quantum and the nature of the infrastructure funding being made available and prioritisation by project funders for projects on the table. For instance, a lot of funding streams at the moment are based on what are called cost metrics, and these are figures or values where Scottish Government feel that that's the benchmark figure that we should be aiming for. Now, the sufficiency of these cost metrics is not entirely appropriate for ourselves. In fact, the location factor, what we call the location factor, affecting ourselves disproportionately affects the delivery of major projects here in remote and rural areas. So these are the sort of 5 main key elements that we would want to have as part of the mitigation plan. The report, as you can see in the recommendation, the report's for noting, but also for those risks to be taken forward as part of the strategic exercise that we talked about earlier on. So happy to take any questions in the meantime.
Thank you very much. Any questions or comments from members? Nothing at this stage. Just to mention that the risk element will be covered at audit and scrutiny tomorrow as well. So recommendations for approval of paragraph 3.1 of the report. Approved. Thank you. And capital programme item 16, Barrenvarty Community Campus. This report provides a summary of the key outcomes from the end of stage report published by Hub North Scotland on 19th of August 22, and to consider options associated with the next steps. A full copy of the report and the appendices are available from the Director for Investment Delivery, and copies of the contents page and the executive summary are included at Appendix 1 to the report. And again, Ian will answer questions.
There is quite a lot of information to this report and to many of the other reports that's come before you over the months and the years. The publication of the end of stage report was a major milestone in the development of the project, and you'll see that the key elements of it relate to design and statutory approvals, cost information and programme. And notwithstanding the significant financial challenges, which I'll come back to shortly, the Health Board's project director and I, supported by the relevant service managers across healthcare, social care and education sectors, are satisfied that the layout, design and specification are entirely consistent with the agreed scope and should be entirely fit for purpose in the context of the needs of these respective services, and importantly their service users and the wider community of Barra and Battersea. As you can see, however, from the report, the biggest challenge facing the project is this continuing increases in cost and affordability. A lot of that is down to the issues that we've just talked about in the previous item. The estimated project cost now stands at £83.56 million, and although we have quite a significant indicative funding package of £55.1 million, this indicates a shortfall of just over £28 million. And in looking how to continue to take the project forward, a number of options were considered by the Project Executive Board when it met at the end of August, and they are set out in Table 3 at paragraph 9.5 of the report. It was the general consensus of the board that option B, which is basically looking to maintain the momentum of the project going forward, but in parallel engage with the relevant Scottish Government directorates, that was identified as the preferred option. And as the committee will be aware, that the chair and Calmian McKeever met with the Deputy First Minister at the beginning of the month, and a copy of the project promotion paper, project proposal, which was provided to Mr. Swinney, was included as Appendix 2 to the report. Importantly, he also, in line with both the Council and the Health Board, he also remains supportive of and committed to the project, and remains fully supportive of the collaborative approach to the integrated service delivery model and the integrated campus, rather than any disaggregation of the proposals. And we in the delivery team will continue to engage with senior civil servants across several directorates within government to agree a number of the issues going forward. But it's all with the aim of securing the necessary additional funding to enable the project to be delivered within or as close as possible to the timescale set out in the report. You'll see at paragraph 3.1b, there's a recommendation which, with the Corners Agreement, would enable the continuing development of the project, which would minimise any loss of momentum whilst that engagement process runs in parallel. And I think it's really important for us to look at that innovative approach to try and do that, because if we lose momentum on the project, then construction inflation costs, etc., will only lead to a further increase in project costs going forward. We will continue to provide regular updates to each committee, each series going forward. But in the meantime, the recommendations at paragraph 3.1 are there, and we're happy to answer any questions from the committee in the meantime. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Ian. Any questions or comments from members? Councillor Crichton.
Thank you, Chairman. Thanks for the report and the update, Mr. McKeon. We've supported this project over a long time, and we really want to see it get over the line eventually, and it's faced many challenges and spiraling costs, of course. We've supported over 2 budget programs. I just want to know what is the possible impact on a third capital program for this current situation.
Thank you. I'll bring Ian back in.
The greatest source of additional funding will always have to be Scottish Government itself. Whether it's the Health Directorate, the Learning Directorate, or any other directorate that we're able to tap into. And I think for us to be able to secure additional funding from government, the government will have to see evidence of this authority and the Health Board's continuing commitment to the project. The point I'm making is that yes, there is £9.9 million as part of the current capital programme. The vast majority of that is still there, and we will be looking for a bid to go as well. But ultimately, there'll be a decision of the chamber as to whether that contribution is becoming real. But as I said, I think if we can evidence our continuing commitment to the project, then that will go a long way to help Scottish Government to match that going forward.
Happy with that, Councillor Crichton. Yeah, I think you're right. I think our commitment to the project has to be unwavering at this point. There are obstacles, but I think we're quite keen to get it done. And having spoken to the Deputy First Minister about this as well, I think he wasn't committal, but he was leaning in the direction of it's a pathfinder project, and there's a lot of innovation and cross departmental working that's really good. So, any done before the interconnectors possibly? Any other comments or questions from members? No. Okay. Do members agree to the recommendation at 3.1? Agreed. Thank you very much. Item 17, and that's the draft digitalisation strategy. And this report seeks approval of the draft digitalisation strategy as appended to the report for public consultation. The strategy has been developed with aims to embed a digital culture within the organisation and throughout the Outer Hebrides through user-focused and collaborative working and addressing digital exclusion. And I believe Charlene will answer members' questions on this. Charlene?
Thank you, Chair. Yes. Yeah, it's a strategy that's been developed in consultation across departments of the Corla. And as you mentioned, it's recommended for approval out to public consultation. Any feedback received will be considered and the strategy amended to incorporate the comments where possible.
Thank you very much for that. Any questions or comments from members? No. Okay, thank you very much. A recommendation for approval at 3.1. Agreed. Thank you. Item 18 is climate. Sorry, thank you, Charlene. Climate change strategy. This report provides an update on the development of the Cornish climate change strategy for 2022 to 2027. The updated draft climate change strategy is included at Appendix 1 to the report, and a summary of consultation responses is provided at Appendix 2 to the report. Anna Hume will answer members' questions. Anna?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, responses from the public consultation have been analysed and incorporated to the draft strategy. A revised draft strategy and a summary of responses and amendments made is appended to the report, and it's recommended that the amendments are considered and the revised strategy is approved.
Thank you very much. Anna, any questions or comments from members? No, I'll just on behalf of myself, I think it's a really important strategy document be putting out to the public. I think on top of the cost of living crisis, climate change it's upon us, and it's really important to our own economy over the next few while. So thank you for that. Yeah, it's a good report. Yeah. Any recommendations for approval at 3.1 of the report? Agreed. Thank you. 19 is this report concerns the climate rationale and case for action documents as appended to the report developed by the Community Planning Partnerships Climate Change Working Group. And again, Anna's available to answer questions.
Thank you, Chair. The CPP's Climate Change Working Group has developed these documents with the aim of providing a specific overview of the impacts of climate change in the islands and start looking at the next steps the group will carry out. So the group is looking for feedback and support from partners, and it's recommended that we agree to contribute to the delivery of the case for action through our own climate change strategy. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that. Any questions or comments from members? No. Okay, the recommendation for approval at 3.1. Agreed. Thank you. Thanks for that. A performance review 20 is reports outstanding and there are none. So we'll now move into private for item 12. So if we could ask the members of the press to leave ready.